Hi guys, and welcome back to the Resolve Sent, where we give you tips on financial planning, career development, and how to strive towards financial independence. My name is Chi, and as you can tell, I'm by myself today. And that's because I'll be giving you an insight into how I moved from a geology career to software engineering. And at the end of this video, I'll be leaving some helpful links to some websites that you can use to explore software engineering. If this content is interesting to you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel below. Now let's get into the video. So I'll start at the very beginning. The very beginning meaning when I was a child. So we got our first computer when I was around 6 years old, and I was not a heavy game player, but I used to play a lot of hearts or like card games. And I never really thought about where those games came from. And so fast forward to high school, I was a science student. And so that means I took a lot of classes that were geared towards sending students to either like medicine or engineering or architecture. There wasn't really a diverse course selection. And so stuff like computer science was never given any attention, or like I wasn't made aware of it. And so my intention was to go to college to study architecture, but I was gently prodded by my parents to switch to an engineering path. And so I got admitted to college for engineering. So these are my college years. So I started my first year with a Bachelor of Engineering on my student record. And so I was planning to do engineering. But after my first year, I realized that it wasn't the program for me. I wasn't happy in it, and I just wasn't doing the best that I could in the program. And so in my second year, after speaking with my parents, I decided that I would switch to the geology program. And that was like a heavens opening moment for me. I was very happy in the program, and I feel like this should have been kind of like a no-brainer, or like the obvious career path to take, just because when I was younger, I enjoyed watching a lot of National Geographic Channel, Animal Planet. And so all those kind of things interested me a lot, like the earth sciences. I wasn't a huge fan of like the physical sciences. And so making that switch was very good for my college years. And so I was in the geology program basically until I graduated. In my final year, my program has this thing where you're able to do electives. And so I had the option of either doing a biology class, I think like a linear algebra class, or an introduction to programming class. And biology was not an option for me. So it was either the algebra or the programming. I had done a linear algebra class in like my first year or second year, and I decided, okay, I'll try something different. And so I took the intro to programming class. I had heard a lot about programming. C++ is scary, Perl is crazy. And so I was going in a little apprehensive and also worrying about this class ruining my GPA. So the first day was very interesting. It was just like the professor just giving us an insight into what we would be covering in the course. Over the time of that semester, over the course of that semester, I really enjoyed what I was learning. This was like basic programming. So if else statements, while loops, just like introduction to programming using Python. And that was very interesting to me. So this was my first foray into the programming space. And I found that like it wasn't that bad. So the first year after college, so I graduated in June, and then I started looking for a job. And that was the year that, I think this was 2015, that was the year that the oil industry took a nosedive, and it was terrible. A lot of the oil companies in Alberta were not hiring. They were laying off older staff. So new grads, it was impossible to get a job. And so I was trying to figure out what to do. Like in Canada, you usually have to wait for like a work permit. And so I was waiting for my work permit to be approved alongside trying to find a job in the geology industry. So since no one was hiring, I tried to look for jobs as an administrative assistant, legal assistant. I think I applied for work in like Safeway, but I didn't get anything. And so I was a little down for a while. And then my boyfriend, current husband now, he got a job on campus. So he was schooling in the States, and he got a job on campus to design an app for a research group. And so this was his own foray into like UI UX design. And so he was like, oh, there's this thing I'm doing. I'm designing an app and I'd never heard of like this field before, and you might also be interested in it. And so I started looking at product design or like UI UX design, and I got like a Photoshop subscription for like a month and tried to do some courses, and I realized that I do not have a design eye at all. And it was a little difficult to take in, but he was like, there's this other side of it where people actually code out these website designs. And so I was like, interesting. It actually, at that point, it actually never occurred to me that websites were programmed. My school portal, for example, or like the school website, how that was on the internet. And so that was a huge moment for me. And I started looking into HTML and CSS. And so my first course was a Udemy course that was on sale. Udemy usually has these sales like maybe once every few months. And so I bought a course that was an introduction to HTML, CSS, and I think JavaScript. And we were supposed to build out a website. So at the end of the course, there would be a tangible project that would say, oh, this is basically what I learned from the course. And so I took that course over the span of a month or 2 months. And at the end of it, I had my first actual coded website. And this was huge. I was very proud of this website. I think I called it AfriPot or something. It was like a meal delivery thing. It was not functional at all. You could like click the links and the page would jump around with, I think it was using like some jQuery. But yeah, I was very proud of it. And this was like one of the defining moments for me where I was like, okay, I can sort of do this web development thing. So once I was done building out my first actual web project, my parents were asking me, okay, what's the next thing? Like, are you coming back home for your youth service, or like, what are you doing there? Nigerian parents don't like you sitting idle for too long. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to start applying to grad schools and to like postgraduate programs just so that I could stay longer in Canada and like further my education. And so I started building out a portfolio. For that portfolio to come to fruition, I needed to have some side projects. And so Teslim was also job searching for UI UX jobs. And so we decided to sprint together basically to create his portfolio website. And so he did a lot of the UI UX work, designing the layout, and I basically brought that to fruition and coded everything from scratch. And so this was actually a good way for us to see how we worked together as a team. And this was my first experience with working alongside someone else. It was challenging in some aspects. We butted heads a lot. But at the end of the day, we came out with a beautiful portfolio site for him that actually got him his first job at Microsoft. And it was a proud moment for me because that website actually had a lot of interactions, a lot of moving parts, a lot of like small animations. And yes, I did. I used a lot of Stack Overflow. So not necessarily copying and pasting, but like just retyping the code, but not really knowing what it was doing. But that's how you learn most of the time. You see a piece of code, oh, this thing translates this piece of code up by 2 pixels. So just doing those things actually gave me a lot of confidence to be like, okay, I can maybe get into a school somewhere. Like I can hone these skills more. And so that was our first kind of like job. We weren't paid for it, but like it was a great side project. And I think that was one of the reasons why I got into my postgrad diploma program. So with my portfolio ready and having one awesome side project on it, I started applying to schools. I applied to some grad schools in, I think, BC and in Toronto. And I also applied to some postgrad diploma programs in Toronto as well. I got into Sheridan College, and the program specifically was called Interactive Media Management. I decided to go back to school for certain reasons. One, I wanted a more formalized education. I know nowadays, like it's possible to start a web development career or career in software engineering without some form of formalized education. But for me, I wanted that structure around my learning. And also my parents were willing to pay for just one more year of education, and I wasn't going to pass that up. And so the program was very helpful because We had multiple different classes that focused on UI UX design, video and audio editing, a lot of back-end development classes, as well as some front-end classes. So this kind of was a comprehensive web development course packed into 8 months, and we were able to touch the different aspects of it. So on some projects, I was the back-end developer. On some other projects, I was the UI UX designer, where I would be able to make story maps. And on some other ones, I would primarily focus on the front end. So it was a great way to basically work in a team and get to touch different aspects of creating a website from scratch. After I finished that in April, and I had started looking for a job the January of 2017, and the job search process is very difficult, especially if this is like your first time searching for a software development role. And so I started searching in January, and I got my first position in June. So now I'm going to talk about the developer interview process. So for my first job, funny enough, I didn't interview for it. And I feel like the phone call kind of informing me that I was getting the job should have been the first clue that this was not necessarily sketchy, but like kind of how things were run at the agency. So the CEO called me up and was like, oh, hey, I looked at your resume or like your portfolio on your college. We like the college students that were graduating from my program usually had like a website, and each of our pictures would be there, and there would be a link to our website. And so he said he found mine and that he was willing to offer me the job, which was kind of weird because I was expecting some form of an interview process. It had moderately great benefits, and it was like 90% remote. And so I was like, okay, great, I'm gonna take this job. It was for an agency that was building a ton of websites for different clients. And so on any given day, like I could be put to work on like multiple different projects. And for me, that's not really how I tend to thrive. I like to focus on one thing and then finish that thing and then do something else. And a lot of these projects were in their final stages. So I was basically adding CSS to like multiple different websites. It wasn't the best learning experience for me just because I wanted to be able to grow in that position, and it just seemed that like I was doing one thing. And so I left that job after like a couple months and started looking for my next position. In preparing for my next position, I actually realized that the next job I get, I will probably have to go through the more formalized developer interview, which involves like a round of a take-home challenge and then an on-site coding interview. And so I decided to learn more of React because a lot of the startups in Toronto were using more JavaScript frameworks. And I feel like just comparing Angular and React, these were at the time the two more famous JavaScript frameworks. And so I decided to start teaching myself React so that by the time I was interviewing, I would be ready to kill it, basically. And so prepping for developer interviews, it takes some time because you have to do some coding challenges and you have to be ready to kind of express your thoughts as you are writing out like your solutions. And that was something that I used to do like by myself. Like if I'm writing something down, I actually talk to myself, but I talk to myself in my head. And so I had to learn how to vocalize those thoughts and express them in a way that was understandable to someone else. And so that was the more difficult part for me, trying to convey, okay, this is why I did something a certain way. But at the end of the day, I managed to get my second developer job with an amazing startup in Toronto that was more focused in like the AI space. It was a great growing experience for me. I feel like I'm in an interview, but it was a great way to kind of work with newer technologies and see how developers that had been working in industry for years went about their days, like how they set themselves up for success, how they spent like a few hours focused on something and then would do something else. And that was just a great, I don't know, I really loved my time there. And the only reason I left was because I got married and I moved to the States. And so now I'm going to talk about like interviewing for jobs here in the US, as well as where I am now. So I moved to the States in, I think, August of 2018, and I got my authorization to work around like November. And so that's when I started actively looking for a job here in Seattle. The interviewing process was pretty much the same as in Canada. But I think like here, a lot of people were more focused on computer science fundamentals. And so I had to start teaching myself basically computer science fundamentals. And this is something that I have been wanting to learn for a while. So learning it while preparing for interviews was a great way to do that, or like to kill two birds with one stone, basically. So I got my first job in the US with an advertising agency in Seattle, and I worked with them from April 2019 to January or February of 2020. I decided to move on from there. I wanted more experience with a bigger company. A lot of tech companies are here in Seattle, Amazon, Microsoft, Boeing, and some other ones that I think Facebook is moving here as well. And so I just wanted to diversify my experience. And so I started actively looking in January of 2020. And so we were actually on vacation in Mexico, and I got a LinkedIn message from a recruiter, and she basically reached out to me and said, oh, we're looking for engineers with your kind of experience, and are you open to interviewing with us? And there's this thing that happens when I'm interviewing. I know Teslim is not going to agree with me, but I sort of know when I'm going to get a job. When I saw the message and like just the whole feeling of, I was just very happy, and I was confident that I would go through to the end and get an offer. And so I very excitedly told her yes, and I started the interview process with them. I got my offer on February 14th of 2020. And so currently I'm working with a team. It's a great team, and I feel like I've had the opportunity to learn from like different people in different facets of the development process. So my team works primarily with Java. We do some Angular, and there's like a data science portion of it. And so I'm also getting into that space as well. And I think like at this stage of a software engineer's career, you should be open to exploring multiple things. I'm not saying like you shouldn't niche yourself into like, or like box yourself into something, but the software engineering space is so vast, and focusing on one thing initially, I feel like you don't get to experience all the other things. This was one of the issues for me, because like when I started, I found front-end development very exciting, and I was very opposed to diversifying into like back-end or like exploring data science. And my current team now is heavily back-end, and we use a lot of Java. And so I had never programmed with Java before, and I had heard like, oh, it's a little difficult. You just hear a lot of bad things about a particular programming language. And so I decided to go in with an open mind. And honestly, after programming with JavaScript for so long, Java is kind of like a refreshing space to be in. So yeah, I feel like for software engineering, it's a constant learning process, and you have to be open to learning new things. You have to be open to making mistakes as you go. And that was something that I had to learn the hard way. And I think I had to learn to separate Chi, the person, from the code that I wrote. And this was a huge thing for me, because I was just so attached to, oh my gosh, my code is not working. Like, what did I do? Oh, it's because I didn't learn this certain thing, or because I just can never learn this certain thing, or because I didn't do a CS degree. And so just putting myself down for so long. And I realized that, see, it's just code. Like people learn it over time. There are people that have been in industry for 15 years and still Google stuff. And so just learning that if something is not working, you can always ask questions. You can always Google it. The solution is out there. And if it's not, you can always work with someone to come up with a solution. And so, yeah, I've been enjoying software engineering so far. I'm very optimistic about where my career is going. I'm very happy with my position. My team is amazing. It's very diverse. It's very inclusive. So yeah, I'm very happy that I made the decision to switch. And ultimately, I'm very happy that I took that intro to programming class in my final year, because I feel like that was the trigger, or like the switch that I can do something that I had never heard of before. And I feel like over the next couple years, I'm very excited to see where my career goes, and to just keep advancing and keep moving. And that brings me to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed hearing a bit more about me and my career journey. I'll include the links below to the websites and some of the courses that I found were very helpful. with my learning process. And just hit me up with some questions if you want more insight into kind of like how I structured my learning and what I'm currently learning now. Because as I said, the software engineering career is a constant learning process. And so if you want some more insight into how I'm keeping up with my skills, you can just let me know in the comments below. Thanks again, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.